This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is the Journey Step-by-Step Christian Podcast, and I'm your host, Karyn Beach. Hey there, like the introduction said, I'm Karyn Beach, and this is the Journey Step-by-Step Christian Podcast. And I call it step-by-step because really that's what all of us Christians are on. We're on a journey, and the only way you can move forward is step by step. And it's a journey, and you know what do they always say? Enjoy the journey, don't focus on the destination. So we're on a journey together. And basically that journey is all about developing faith and trusting in the Lord, trusting in God. And when the person I'm going to talk to tonight, when I got the information about his book, I thought, this is someone I need to have on my show. His book is really powerful. I've read some of the reviews of it, and it's one of those books that's, short but effective. My favorite kind of book. I'm not a War and Peace type of girl. So it's a short and effective book called Rockstar: Finding God's Purpose for Your Life. And if you're like me, you got a certain image of hair bands when you heard the term rock star. But that's not really what David Essel wrote about. And if you look at the cover of his book, you're like, oh, that makes sense. But if you thought about Def Leppard, then you're not alone. Because I thought about that too. So David Essel, welcome to the journey.
Karyn, I love it. Def Leppard owes us for a shout out to them now.
Exactly. But that's what you think about when you think about a rock star.
Exactly. Yeah. And, Karyn, this book was so magical when we talk about walking in faith because of the fact that it was given to me by a homeless person. And let me tell you the story, how this book came about, because it's so crazy. I live in Florida, and at the time where I was living, there was a marina that I would run around every day, and there was homeless people that would hang out during the day, during the evening, they're panhandling, doing their thing. And every day I would run, and it would be, daylight, and I'd be walking through the marina, and this homeless guy, Mark, would come up to me, and he'd go, "Excuse me, sir, I just need a couple dollars to get a bus to go home to my brother to get work." And I would go, "Mark, great to see you." Well, Mark, like quite a few homeless people, was a drug addict and alcoholic, and he never remembered me day to day. And he'd go, "Have we met before?" And I said, "Mark, yesterday. And the day before that, and the day before that." And so he said, "Well, I just need to get a bus ride home." And I said, "Well, I run every day, Mark, and I never have money in my pocket. You know that. Every day I tell you the same thing, and every day you come up and ask me for money. But Karyn, this day was different." I reached in my pocket, and I go, "Oh my gosh, for some reason there's a $1 bill in my running shorts." So I said, "Wait, Mark, I've got $1. I didn't even know I had it." So I handed it to him, and as I was reaching out to give him it, it was a $5 bill. Now, Karyn, this is going to sound crazy to a lot of your listeners, but I don't mind giving $2 or $3 to a homeless person. But then all of a sudden it was a $5, and I was thinking to myself, wait a second, that's too much money. It's like, that's how crazy my brain was thinking. But I had already showed it to him, and he had taken it. And I said, "Mark, this is what I'm going to say. I would like to bless that bill in your hand, and I'm going to ask you to use it for God's highest purpose." And he said, "Okay, thank you very much." And I turned around to walk away, and he said, "Wait a minute, sir." And I turned back around, and he said, "This is a 5. This isn't a 1. I said, "I know, Mark. I thought it was a 1, my bad, but keep it, but please use it for." He goes, No, I can't take it without giving you something in return." And Karyn started going through his knapsack. I go, "Mark, wait a minute. Anything you have in there, you need more than I do. Trust me. Don't worry about it. Take it, use it, take it. It's good." And he looked at me again, Karyn, and he said, "Sir, I can't take it." I have to give you something in return. Now, he said that 3 or 4 times, and finally I said, Mark, what are you going to give me? And he goes, I'll tell you what, I am awesome at making up stories. Wait 1 minute, and I'm going to tell you a story. And I said, Mark, how long is this going to take? He said, oh, it'll take me a minute to make it up, and then it'll take me 3 to 4 minutes to share it with you. And I said, all right. So I'm standing there, and you could see him thinking. Karyn, the next thing that came out of his mouth was a condensed version of my book, Rockstar. Like, I hadn't written the book. And here he is telling me about the power of faith and when you're struggling in life. And he was talking about the life of a rock in the desert that knew it had a purpose to serve God, but it hadn't found it yet. And he told me this whole story, and I was blown away. I ran home, and I said to him, I go, Mark, I'm going to make this into a book. He goes, you do that. I said, and I will give you credit. He said, okay. I went home, and I outlined what he had told me. Now, he told me the story in about 2 or 3 minutes. So when I went to write the outline, there really wasn't a lot there. But the nuts and bolts of it was powerful. And the story is about a rock who knew he had a divine purpose to serve God. But it took a long time for that purpose to surface. And during the time in between when he knew he had a reason that he was on earth and he was going to serve God, and he found that purpose, it was really hard for him, Karyn. I mean, people don't think of a rock having a hard life, but this rock had a hard life. Okay, he was frustrated, he was anxious, he was depressed because he didn't know why he was here. Mm. And at the end of the story, we find out why he was here. And he had one of the most profound, I guess I would say, one of the most profound reasons for his existence that manifested by being actually even written about in the Bible.
Wow.
So when we talk about, having faith, and to me, faith is belief in the yet unseen. And as a minister, when I do sermons, I love talking about faith because faith is one of the hardest things in the world. It sounds so easy. Oh, just have faith in God. Oh, just have faith in Jesus. Well, that's great unless you're struggling with an addiction or finances or a relationship or a health issue. And then it's a lot harder just to have faith. It's a lot harder to believe in the yet unseen, to believe if you're listening right now and you're wondering why for 10, 15, 20 years you struggled with finding your passion, finding your purpose, why you struggled for 20 years in relationships, or maybe you're like me. For 25 years, I was an alcoholic and a cocaine addict. And in that period of time, I had faith that at some point I would get clean and sober, but I didn't know when. And I was really afraid to let those things go because those two substances were a huge part of my identity for a large part of my life. So when this homeless man, Mark, gave me this book, I knew exactly what I needed to do with it. And that was to publish it to give other people hope that if they can walk through the darkest journey of the soul, they will find on the other side their purpose and why they're here.
That is beautiful. And I love the way you talk about faith as something that is easy to have when, things are easy. But I think, that's part of the reason I call my show The Journey, because it is a journey. And just like if you went on a walk, you would go through nice paths, you would find muddy parts of the path. But part of our journey is learning to have faith during those dark times. And It doesn't make it any easier to know you'll get through this. When you're in the middle of something, it's hard to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And faith is knowing that it's there, at least to me, even when we can't see it.
Yeah, and and let's talk to people who aren't in a major struggle right now. If you are not struggling, but you have a partner, a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, a child who is, please don't ever say, just have faith.
Oh, gosh, no.
Please don't ever say everything will be fine. You're in God's hands, because those things will actually demotivate you. When and again, in our teachings, when I'm doing sermons, I'm constantly talking, Karyn, about God will meet us halfway. Now, if it's a miracle, God may take all of the burden away from us, and he may walk in and create a miracle for us. But miracles don't happen every other second. And so what we believe is God is going to meet us halfway, but we have to do our human work. And so when you're struggling, we need to figure out, what do I need? Do I need more patience? Do I need to be more actively engaged in my sobriety and my finances and my relationship? What is it that I need to? I know God has his role. I don't have to remind God about what his role is. I know he's got his intentions. I know that his side of the street is taken care of. So it's not about God. It's, of course, having faith in God is huge. Praying daily is huge. But it's really about saying, okay, I know he has my back. Do I have my own back? Am I doing the work necessary as a human being to meet God halfway and to alleviate the suffering, the struggle, to alleviate the repetitive mistakes that I make as an alcoholic or as a food addict or as a nicotine addict or as a spending addict or as a whatever? Can I get out of my own way, Karyn, and allow his grace to come over me, which might mean I've got to give up stuff. I may have to remove that constant spending that is creating financial stress. I may have to remove the need to be right all the time and to correct my partner, which, in my work as a counselor and a minister, I work in this field every day. And there are some tough decisions for people to make who want to have great faith. Just because you say you have great faith does not mean life is going to be easy. And you mentioned something earlier that I'm going to repeat. When life is going your way, that's when it's so easy to say, I have great faith. But that's not a test of our faith. The test of our faith is like in the book Rockstar, Finding God's Purpose for Your Life, when the rock kept getting passed by. And he thought that he was going to go, I'll tell you a little bit of the story. In the beginning, the rock is in a desert. And all these men are coming along, and they're building this massive mansion in the desert for a merchant who's very wealthy. And the rock had never found his purpose. And he had been around a long time. Rocks live for centuries, Karyn. They aren't like humans. They're not at the 80-year mark. They can live for centuries. So this poor little guy had been around a lot longer than any human, and he had never found his purpose. So he's in the desert, and he hears all these construction people coming. He's going, oh, my God, I'm going to be used as part of the foundation of this castle, this big, rich merchant's home. I'm so excited. But Karyn, he was passed by. He was never picked up and used. And then as you read on later in the book, when they built a moat around the castle, he kept thinking, oh, I'm going to be part of the moat to protect the castle. But he was never picked up, Karyn. And he went into depression. And if you've ever seen a depressed rock, have you seen a depressed rock?
I think I've been one.
Right? And he got so depressed that he sunk into the sand. But here's the coolest thing, and I'm not going to spoil the whole book, but I'm going to tell you this part of it. As he was sinking in the sand in his depression, there was a little spark that never went out in his heart, and that was the spark of God. And he latched onto that tiny spark, even though he had been disappointed, depressed, passed over for centuries in the desert. There was that little spark that he held on to. And in that chapter, he shimmies his way back up to the surface to the sun. And he starts praising God, even though he had not found his purpose yet. And he made a decision, and I'm getting chills right now. He made a decision on that day that he was going to praise God 24 hours a day as long as it took for him to find his purpose. And he did, Karyn. And through his praising, when he had no idea of why he was here, in his praising of God, the doors opened up. And at the end of the book, he becomes one of the most important role players in the whole Bible. That's how powerful his faith was.
Wow. And I know from reading a bunch of reviews of your book that got really good reviews, by the way, there's a surprise ending. So what happens to that rock is a surprise. And if you want to know that surprise, people, if you want to be like me, you're going to have to get the book. Because I'm like, what is the surprise? What is this? I love surprises. And I've been that rock. So I need to know what the surprise is.
I love it. You know, if we look at just the expanse of a human being's life, I've never met anyone that has had an easy life, Karyn. No. I've never met anyone, you know.
Even I have met you think that have had an easy life, because the thing is, people think, oh, they have money, oh, they have this certain material success. You don't know what their life has been like. You don't know their pain and their struggles, but you have to believe and know that they have had that pain and that struggle.
Yes. And the thing, you know, a lot of times we will actually say, well, they don't even know what it's like to be in our shoes, but we don't know what they've gone through. You know, let me give you an example. In one of our books, Focus, Slay Your Goals, I share the story of Ray Higdon. Ray Higdon was a single dad, 2 little kids in 2008, 2009, when we had the huge economic crash in our country. And he came to me and he said, I have no money. I can't pay you for your services. He said, but would you mind meeting me for lunch, and could you buy me lunch? That's how he was hurting, right? He didn't have money to pay me as a counselor. He didn't have money for lunch, and I said, sure. I met him for lunch. I took care of his lunch. And at the end of it, he said to me, what do you think I need to do? And I said, Ray, you have outrageous, powerful energy. You have a great persona. You're very easy to talk to. And what I'm going to share with you is that all you need to do is find something you believe in to sell. Now, he was selling real estate, and he did really great until the crash, and then he lost every penny to his name.
Wow.
He decided that he was going to do whatever it took, and that's faith, for as long as it took, and that's faith. Today, he is a multimillionaire doing what he loves, making a huge positive difference in this world. But in 2008, 2009, Karyn, and if you saw him today, if you didn't know the story I just told you, he is so effervescent, you would have never known the fear, the anxiety, the insecurity that he went through until he turned it around. So that's why whenever I speak with, and whether I'm doing sermons or on shows like yours, Karyn, I always want to make people aware that before you go saying, well, they don't know this because they have it easy, like get their backstory. And before you tell someone, oh, just have faith, remove those words. And instead of saying just have faith, you could say, is there anything I could do to help you with your journey? Do you know of anyone out there that might be able to help you with your struggles? Have you reached out and asked for help from a local minister or pastor? Or have you done, in other words, if you ask questions when someone is struggling, you're engaging them in a potential solution. But if you're giving them some kind of canned answer like, well, obviously you don't have enough faith, well, that could actually push someone away from God instead of closer to him. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, because I'm someone that suffers from depression, and most people wouldn't know it if I didn't mention it, but I'm also a suicide survivor. And for years, I was told that, I ended up thinking I was a bad Christian because I should have had more faith. I should have prayed more. I should be more trusting. And I would get so depressed that it would be hard to concentrate, to think, to even pray. but now that I have people beating me over the head with it, it made me feel worse. Or, have faith. Okay, well, that's hard right now. You don't
Yeah.
know where I am right now.
Right.
So
That's right.
it does become a difficult thing when, as someone who's suffered, and, I lost my mom when I was 15. And, when you're a 15-year-old girl and you've lost your mom, somebody telling you, well, she's in a better place,
Right.
doesn't really help. I'm like, what could be a better place than being with your child at an age
Amen.
where she really needs you? So a lot of times the very things that people say that are supposed to help you end up hurting you. It's not their intention. That's definitely not what they're trying to do, but that's often the effect that it has.
Yeah, and I can tell you why people do that. I can tell you why people say, oh, just have faith, or things are going to get better, tomorrow's a new day, all those kind of nonsensical statements to someone who's suffering. The reason why people say that, Karyn, is because they don't want to feel our pain. They can't handle it, quite frankly. So instead of sitting with someone who's in pain and saying, please share with me, please talk to me, I'm with you, everything is confidential. If you want to leave something with me, if you'd like to take some burden, please share it. That is the professional and the loving thing to do. But and because I work with families and kids outside of faith, it's the same thing. Your 13-year-old comes home and she had just met a boy and they had just started dating a couple months ago, and now her best girlfriend stole him from your daughter. And so your daughter comes home and says, I can't believe this happened. And what do most parents say? Oh, Johnny wasn't good for you anyway. There's many better boys out there. Girls that do that from time to time, but don't let that affect your attitude with other friends. In other words, instead of saying, I am so sorry, tell me how you're feeling. That's terrible. What does it feel like to have your boyfriend taken away? What does it feel like to have your best friend as the person? See, when we get into the questions, then we're being empathetic, caring, loving, and that child or your next door neighbor or your friend from church who's suffering will know that you care, because you're not shutting them down. When we say, I'm really struggling, and someone says, well, you obviously don't have enough faith, what that person is doing who said you obviously don't have enough faith is they're taking your struggle and they're shoving it right down your throat.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear it. Now, you mentioned something earlier that I'm going to repeat. Most people aren't doing this on purpose. I agree 1,000%. But your radio show and our discussion, Karyn, is something we talk about in my profession 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, to try to wake people up to understand you could be hurting your child, your partner, your neighbor, your coworker more than you're helping them if you're not willing to sit with their discomfort.
Yeah. And sometimes, for me, when suffering from grief, when suffering from depression, a lot of times I think another reason on top of your reason why people do that is I think that, nature abhors a vacuum and people feel like they have to say something. And the only thing they know how to say is, the things they say, where for me, a lot of times I just need you to be there.
Exactly.
You don't have to say anything. Just the fact that you're there is enough. Just the fact that, someone isn't alone. And if you want to talk, then talk. Then, ask the questions and be probing and be, interested. But sometimes if you don't know what to say, don't say anything.
Yes, and let's take a look at the role of the person suffering, the person with addiction or depression or anxiety or financial crushes or whatever it might be. That person also has a responsibility. And the responsibility would be to say to a friend, hey, I've got a lot going on in my life. I need to vent. I need to share it. I would like you could just sit and listen to me. I don't really need advice. I just need to get this stuff off my chest. Would you be willing to sit and to listen without feedback? And now we're taking control, Karyn. The person who's suffering can take control and make sure that their friend or whoever, and listen, there's professionals that do the opposite of what I'm sharing. There's professionals that you will sit with, who ministers, pastors, counselors, coaches, that because they haven't had the training that you and I are talking about, they're doing the very best they can, but they may not even know that they're shooting themselves in the foot with their advice.
Right.
You know, there a lot of people don't need advice. What they need is 2 listening ears.
That's true. That's true. They just need to be heard. And sometimes, you know, we don't realize that because, you know, as someone, my day job, I've been in learning and development like my whole career. And when you look at communication, people always talk about talking, but the other half is listening. And that's the part that makes people uncomfortable a lot of times. And that's the part that people have difficulty doing.
It is. And it is hard. You know, when I've had a chance to help raise 4 children, and in each of those cases, they would come in with real serious issues to them at the time in their life. If they were 6, 8, 12, 14, as adults, we have a tendency to forget that the child is going through something traumatic. I mentioned earlier, at 13, your first boyfriend, or at 16, your first girlfriend, or whatever it is. To an adult, it's like, oh, get over it. You know, you're only 16, you're only this, you're only that. To the 8-year-old or the 16-year-old, it is their life. So we can actually encourage them to share by leaving space for them to talk versus by telling them that what they're going through is not that big of a deal.
I remember my dad saying that to me once when I was a teenager. Well, when you get older, and I was like, but Dad, this is the oldest I've ever been, you know, because that's, I mean, at the time when you're 8, you know the world as an 8-year-old. You don't know the world as a 45-year-old looking back, you know, almost 30 years.
And the other thing, Karyn, is the brain does not become fully functioning until about 24 to 26. And what that means is our decision-making skills are not physically honed until we're between 24 and 26. So a lot of times why younger people will make the same mistake over and over and over again is because the brain has not matched consequences with actions.
Right.
And I'm not making excuses, you know, for our younger generation. I'm just saying this is physiologically a fact.
Right.
And so a lot of us don't really, like, I remember, and we have a brand new book out, Love and Relationship Secrets, that everyone needs to know, that I dedicated to my mom and dad. And in the dedication, Karyn, I wrote this. I remember waking up at 33 years of age, calling my mom and dad and saying to them, 90% of what you tried to teach me as a child was accurate. And I pushed back. I didn't know any better. And I didn't know how intelligent you both were. And that was a phone call I made at 33. I woke up at 33. I'm a little slower than most people waking up at 25, Karyn. If you listen to those statistics, I think I'm a little slower than a lot of people with a lot of reasons. But at 33, I woke up and realized that the brilliance of my mom and dad with their decision-making skills and their advice was something I pushed back on. And I didn't even realize it.
I've always said, no, someone should not have children until they realize the brilliance of their parents, if they had good parents, because, you know, like I said, my mom died when I was 15, and I remember distinctly looking at her like, what could you possibly know about what I'm going through? What? who are you? Patty
Yeah.
Beach, whatever. And then, and then, like, seriously, there's not a day that goes by that something she says doesn't resonate in my head. And I'm like, when I get to heaven and I see her, I'm going to be like, okay, I get it. You were right.
I know.
I dated a guy for 3.5 years just to prove my father wrong.
And who was right, Karyn? You or your dad?
My dad. And it took me 3.5 years because, my dad met him after 6 months, was like, nice guy, not the one for you. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? 3.5 years later, I had to go back and say, you were right.
Yes.
Because we don't really, we don't realize, what we have. But at the same time, our parents and adults need to realize that they don't know. They don't realize. We have to remember, okay, when I was your age, I didn't know anything either. That's the other side of that, So
so true. It is.
I don't know.
True.
It's crazy. We have to realize, we have to see the world as that 8-year-old is seeing the world.
Yes. Yeah.
And recognize where they are. And that right now, whatever happened is the biggest thing in the world to them. It's the biggest thing that ever could happen.
And when we look at going back to our concept of faith, the belief in the yet unseen, when we're parents, one of the greatest tools or gifts of a parent is to believe that our children will get it. I'm going to do the best I can, but I've got to believe. I've got to have faith that when the time is right, they're going to understand everything I'm trying to teach them right now.
Right.
And that's a very grounded parental faith. I'm going to do the best I can with my child, and I'm going to trust that if I can do the best I can, that it will have a powerful impact on them down the road.
And that's the same kind of faith that God has in us.
Amen to that.
I'm going to teach them this, and they're going to get it eventually. They're going to understand, because when you're going through it, you don't. But when you get that hindsight, when you can look back at it, you can kind of see, okay, this is what I was supposed to learn. This is why this happened the way it did. Because God has a reason for what he does, for where you are at that time. You talked to, what's his name they gave the idea for the book? Mark?
Oh, Mark, the whole.
Yeah, Mark, you ran by him every day, but on this particular day, you happen to have a 5 in your running pants pocket.
Yep.
You happened to stop by on that day. He didn't even remember you from day to day, but on that particular day, everything came together, and it came together like that for a reason.
We have 11 books out, Karyn, and Rockstar, the book we're talking about tonight, Finding God's Purpose for Your Life, is one of the most profound books I've ever written, and it was given to me by a homeless man.
And there's a twist at the end that I'm dying to figure out.
There's a big twist. It is quite amazing. And the other thing I'll mention briefly about faith as well that I think is important, I mentioned that we have 11 books out. I wrote books, Karyn, for 20 years with zero recognition. And when I say zero recognition, I mean zero recognition. I would write a book, we would promote the pants out of it, I would invest in my book, and it would sell very little. And I did it for 20 years. On the 21st year of writing, which was now probably 5 years ago, our book, our very first #1 bestseller, hit. But if I didn't have that faith, knowing that at some point this was going to break, I would have stopped writing after year 2. I wasn't getting any validation whatsoever. But I believe that's one of the reasons God has me here, is to share messages. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, when the first one went number one, then the last 4 books have all been number one bestsellers, including the book we're talking about tonight, Rockstar.
Wow. And it's all about finding your purpose. And like you said, when you think you found your purpose, it doesn't mean that everything's going to happen overnight.
That's right.
You still have to stay the course. And because, God says that we need to seek him. If you've ever searched for anything, you don't find it when you first look for it. You have to seek it. You have to keep looking for it. And eventually you find it. You might say, oh, I know it's here. And then you go there and it's not there. You got to go somewhere else. So if you've ever looked for something, it takes time. And so even when you found your purpose, it takes time. It takes time to put it together. It takes time to get it to the point where you think it should be. Because remember, whenever you're talking about faith and purpose, we're on God's time. We're not on ours.
Yes. Yeah. And, as a human being, that's really frustrating, Karyn.
Are you kidding? I've been looking for a husband since I was 20. I'm 51.
Right.
God's got some really interesting timing, but it's his time, not mine.
It is. It is. If and here's something for all of us to think about. If we can surrender to that reality that you just said, and this is not easy when I'm asking our audience to do, but and myself and you, Karyn, if we can have the goal and we can do the work, and the goal doesn't come to us, but we keep doing the work, and the goal doesn't come to us, but we keep doing the work, that's the power that we have as humans. We don't have to give up, and we also can drop that desire for instant gratification and keep doing the work. There will be doors opening, and sometimes they're surprising doors. Sometimes they're doors we never even thought about. Sometimes they're bizarre doors, but doors will begin to open if we continue to do the work, have the faith, treat others with outrageous respect and compassion. Life will get better. We just don't know when, but it will.
And it can happen instantly.
And it can. It sure can.
When God is ready, not when we are ready or when we think we're ready. Because, I've thought I've been ready for my husband for years. I'm ready. I'm here. But,
Right.
what are we doing? I guess that's another show. But David, it has been a wonderful talking to you, and I'm going to get your book and I'm going to send you an email once I know what this surprise ending is, because it's killing me.
Oh, you are gonna!
It's killing me.
You're gonna love the ending. You're gonna love it.
I have an idea. I think I know what it is.
Okay.
But I will know. I will know. But because when I was reading reviews, I was like, surprise ending. And then somebody else was like, I love the twist at the end. I'm like, twist? Like the 4th or 5th time, I was like, surprise, twist, unexpected. What is this? I have to know. So I'm looking at your book on Amazon right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's on paperback for $5.99.
That's right. That's right.
I can get it from Amazon Prime by Friday. So I'm getting this book. This is my weekend, reading the book and finding out what this magical twist is, because you've hooked me, David.
I love it, Karyn.
So thank you so much. Rockstar, Finding God's Purpose for Your Life by David Essel. It is a short book, a short story with a big message. That's what the cover says. It's a short, right. I will add, it's a short story with a big message and a surprise ending. Did you like did you like that? And a surprise ending.
Yes.
That's how we're describing it. You can get it at Amazon. The link to it will be in the description for this show. So David, thank you so much. Until next time, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go.